At Law and sponsor of this program, Joseph Ferretti. Good morning, Torts.
Good morning, Matt, John, and Rob.
Good to have you. And the assistant prosecuting attorney, soon to be prosecuting attorney in another couple of weeks, Joe Kinser, joins us. Joe, pull that microphone much closer to you if you could, sir. Just
Yes, sir.
if you don't mind, that'd be awesome. Everybody can hear you nice and cleanly that way. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Yeah. January 1st is your first day as the special prosecutor, so you said prosecuting attorney, correct?
Yes, January 1 is when I take over, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a whirlwind couple months, but I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, it'd be great to have you in the office, and we appreciate your appearance today, sir.
Thank you.
So your first day on the job is a holiday, though, so
Gotta
you got to
work.
work the
That's right.
holiday.
That's
Come on.
right. I'll probably be there, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Joe, the Melissa Beavers sentencing took place yesterday.
Yes.
And if you could, maybe review the facts of the case just to get everybody up to speed and tell us the specific sentencing that was handed down.
Sure thing. So this was a really big case for the office, a really unfortunate set of circumstances. Ms. Beavers was an employee of the Berkeley County Clerk's office. She started work in 2018, and unfortunately by October of 2019 she started fraudulently taking money through that office, and it kind of just grew like these things do when they happen. And it started small and it grew and grew and grew. It started from skimming cash that would come into the office and then having to cook the books to make it so that no one can tell that she skimmed that cash. And then it progressed from there to forgeries and utterings and forging checks to her personal company, forging public seals, and forging a notary stamp relating to her personal family court case that had been ongoing, and it really just spiraled and snowballed thereafter. And the grand total of monies that were fraudulently taken through the office was over $250,000.
In the span of that time being hired in 2018 to 2019?
Well, it started in 2019 and went through 2020. And then she was ultimately charged. Well, we indicted her in 2023 for these offenses.
And the sentencing handed down yesterday from Judge Redding.
Yes. So the case resolved by way of a plea. It had been a 41-count indictment. The grand jury indicted on 41 counts, and she pled to 7 felonies, which included embezzlement, falsifying records, forgery, uttering, 2 counts of forgery of a public record, and or actually three counts of forgery of a public record. So 7 felonies altogether. She received what we call a split sentence. So when a judge is sentencing on felony counts like this, unless it's very specific charges, people are eligible for probation. They're eligible to have a certain amount of their prison time held over their head while they stay at liberty. They don't have to go to prison, and they can be under the supervision of the court's probation department. But the court doesn't have to suspend all of it. And the judge did not suspend all of it in this case. The way it broke down, most of those charges either carry 1 to 10 or 2 to 10 years in the penitentiary. And when they were stacked together, her total effective sentence in prison that she has to serve first is 6 to 40. So she will be serving 6 to 40 years in the penitentiary, and then when she gets out, there will be a 2 to 10 year prison sentence held over her head while she's on a probationary sentence for 7 years. Now, if she violates the terms of her probation, she can be sent back to prison for that remaining 2 to 10. But that was the split. So 6 to 40 in, and then 2 to 10 suspended.
And restitution was also part of this?
Correct. So restitution was ordered, full restitution, but the court broke down the priority of restitution. So she'll be responsible for that total sum, but the first $25,000 $152.75 is owed to the Berkeley County Commission, and any monies that she pays will first go toward that. And then thereafter, the remainder is split between a company called WV Corp, which was the county's insurer that had to presumably, pay out for her fraud. So the insurer is number 2 on the list, and then number 3 is the West Virginia State Auditor's Office.
Is this generally accomplished through garnished wages at some point?
Yes. A term of her probation is going to be that she be employed. But normally, as far as like garnishing the wages, that's kind of something that comes later if it becomes a civil judgment. When it's restitution, they are required to make the restitution payment to the court, and then it gets sent out to the victim. And they can make those payments monthly. Normally, that's what we see. They work out some kind of payment schedule with the probation department that, hey, I'm going to pay, just like your car payment, your mortgage, anything else. I'm going to pay $500 a month on this, and then they hold them to it.
Mr. Ferretti.
Hey, Joe, first of all, congratulations on your new office.
Thank you, sir.
I have all the confidence in the world that the county will be in good hands going forward. A little bit, you mentioned one thing that I think is important for the public to understand, that this fraud that took place was an insurable event and was, in fact, insured by the county. So my guess is here that there was a policy in place that paid the county back for whatever losses the county was able to show as a result of the fraud. Is that correct?
Yes, I think to the extent of the policy, we know whatever the policy limits were.
Right. And as you mentioned, then the insurance company would be one of the parties standing in line attempting to recoup some of those losses if restitution is ultimately paid. What is your experience with regard to restitution orders that are included in sentencing by our judges? By and large, is restitution paid by these offenders, or is it something that we can expect maybe pennies on the dollar? Well, overall, what's your experience with the success rate involving restitution orders?
It's really, in my experience, it's fact specific, on a case-by-case basis. If I've got a person who owes $20,000 in restitution and they're placed on probation and they get employment, and they've got, the maximum we can put people on probation for in the state is 7 years, which is what Miss Beaver's got. So in that 7 years, you break it down to kind of a monthly payment, and hey, if they're employed, a lot of times, yes, the victims do recover a lot, maybe not all, but a lot of that money. And actually at the end of a probationary sentence, if there's more restitution that is owed, that is unpaid, it can and does get converted to a civil judgment. So then, the person who is owed that money can take, have legal authority to do things such as garner wages and attempt to collect that money. But in my experience, it's really case specific. The age old adage of, you can't get blood out of a stone kind of thing. Certainly that happens sometimes. But there are plenty of cases that are financial crimes that involve restitution, wherein through the restitution process, the victims are financially made whole or really close to it. But it's really case by case.
Yeah, and of course we can imagine anybody who's filled out an employment form or application knows that if you have to put down that you have committed a felony in your past, it's
Right.
pretty difficult to get a job and become productive in that way. And
Right.
of course that would affect the ability to make restitution. I know that at the hearing yesterday, Ms. Beavers and her very capable attorney, Craig Manford, made the argument for leniency, as naturally they would, and as part of their argument claimed that if probation would be the sentence for Ms. Beavers, she in fact would have a better ability to become productive, become employed, and perhaps make restitution to the county and to the county insurance company. But it seemingly was an avenue that the judge was not willing to travel, given the type of sentence that was handed down. This pretty stiff sentence,
Yeah.
Joe. What were some of the judge's comments that perhaps gave some insight as to what Judge Redding was thinking as to why this sentence was appropriate for Ms. Beavers.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And Mr. Manford made the argument that he should have made. And oftentimes in these cases, when it's a financial crime, oftentimes that argument wins the day, right? Do you want your pound of flesh and your punishment, or do you want your money back? Because you're not going to be able to get a lot of money back from them while they're sitting in a penitentiary. We are able to there's a mechanism in the code that allows us to get money off of their books and stuff. When family members put money on a prisoner's account, we can deduct a certain percentage of that and take it from them for court costs and things of that nature. But that's normally what the court is faced with. Well, do I punish this person by sending them to prison, or do I try in a financial crime to get to the remedy of making the victim whole again and getting this money back? The difference with this case that Judge Redding was pretty clear on is that this is a unique case. This isn't your standard embezzlement from a corporation or even a small business or anything like that. This was a breach of public trust. This was a public office, public monies that were coming through, and that breach of trust needed to be reckoned with. And I think that the way the judge split this sentence was really demonstrates that there is an element of punishment here. And then still thereafter, after you do this significant time of this 6 to 40, thereafter she's expected to come out, be on probation, and start making payments toward that restitution. But if this were an incident, even through a public office like this, a breach of trust, if the amount were smaller, if it, something like that, I could have foreseen a possible more lenient sentence that allowed probation and an opportunity to pay more. But this needed dealt with in a harsher way, just because of the breach of trust.
John Gilstrap.
What was her narrative out of this? I mean, I understand, okay, you're late on a car payment, so the temptation to steal $150, but $272,000.
Right. And I think that also led to the sentence, because there wasn't I don't want to say legitimate,
what was her story,
but
though?
there
What was
wasn't
her
an excuse. It was greed. It was she started small. She realized that she could get away with it, and that she was getting away with it, and really took advantage of at the time Mr. Small's age and his health, and really just roll with it. Oh, I got away with this, I'm going to get away with that. I think the judge specifically said, that he looked for some mitigating reason, something, if this was a alcohol or drug issue or a gambling issue or something like that, where she was compelled, and it was just greed was his ultimate. I believe he actually put that in the order. It was just greed.
And what was the tipping point? How did she get caught?
I think with the Mr. Small's passing, and then changing of the guard over there a couple times, some new folks came in and started looking around and spotted something and reported it. And then the fraud unit from the auditor's office really they're very good when fraud has been perceived or detected, and they come in and really comb through stuff. They're very good. And in this case, they were able to determine how she was skimming cash, how she was covering it up. And then that led to looking through more files. And then they were able to see, oh, she's writing checks to her own personal business out of these accounts that, that money those accounts should never be used for anything that's going to a roofing company, and they really spend the time when fraud is detected and they come in, they really spend the time of combing through and piecing that all together.
Matt Miller.
Is fraud insurance a common thing? Do most city, county type of governments have that sort of a safety net in place?
I believe so, yes, to an extent, at least here in Berkeley County, for sure.
It's just not something, that comes to my mind that I would think about.
Right. Well, you've got public monies running through, and you've got people, and people are flawed. And, although this case didn't have an instance where someone had some legitimate reason, like the mounting medical bills or the something, you know, that wasn't here. But those things unfortunately do happen, and sometimes even good people make bad decisions when they have that availability in front of them, the ability to do that. So
coming back to you, Joe Ferretti.
And Matt, I'll just add that that coverage is probably available under your own homeowner's policy if you look at it, if you're a victim of fraud. Joe, I understand you may be constrained in how you can comment to this next question, but I'm looking at this from public interest now rather than the legal world. You know, we just had a pretty massive fraud in one of our county departments, and you know, a department where a lot of money flows through, and a lot of it's money from real estate transactions and whatnot. Was there any concern that the knowledge of the fraud and God forbid any complicity in it might have been taking place within that department? And to what extent did the investigation either provide information that we should not be worried that others might have been complicit, or is that information that's in your world still perhaps a matter of further investigation?
You know, certainly once a fraud like this is revealed in any manner, that's a huge part of it then is looking in to say, was this person working alone? Were there additional folks who, like you said, either assisted or were complicit or joined in or anything like that? And certainly that is something that is always looked into. It was investigated in this case as well. I can't comment if there's any, you know, if there's any ongoing investigation relating to that, other than to say absolutely that's something that we look at, that the auditor's office looks at, and our office specifically looks at, because and if nothing else, even if you think about it, just for purposes of the investigation, even if no one else did know, even if it was totally a solo operation and nobody was complicit, you still want to interview and talk to all of the people around that person, just for investigative purposes. What did you ever see anything that made you scratch your head? Did you know, they may have seen something that wouldn't even rise to the level of being complicit, but just like, oh, well, you know what? There was this one day he or she said this, and it was really kind of odd to me. And now that I look at it, I think it might be relevant, you know, and all of those avenues were certainly pursued, and many people were interviewed. And to the extent, if there's any other ongoing investigations, I can't comment on it. But
what's the lowest level of complicit in something like this? If Matt and I are working together in a public setting, and I see or I think I see him doing something that is illegal, but we're buddies, and I just look the other way. I don't participate, but I look the other way. Am I complicit at that point?
Well, the thing is, that's going to be really, really hard to prove. You know, at the end of the day, unless they come in and admit to that they saw something and they knew it was fraud, but they didn't, most people aren't going to readily admit to that. And if there's no paper trail to it, if there's no email of, wow, Timmy, I saw you swipe a $100 bill out of the drawer today. What's that about? You know, if there's nothing like that, that's going to be a very difficult thing to prove. But certainly it could rise to the level of a conspiracy or aiding and abetting.
Joe Ferretti, did you have a final question?
Yeah, on the investigation itself, I think, of course, Joe, when this kind of case lands on your desk, you know, everybody in your office is rolling up their sleeves, and, of course, local law enforcement assist you in the investigation. Talk a little bit about the role of the state auditor's office. You know, what did they do in the investigation? What value did they lend to getting to the bottom of this, and the importance of the state auditor function?
Sure. So, you know, and one of the things I really didn't know about the state auditor's office until dealing with them with their fraud unit is, you know, they don't, just as a rule, they don't audit, you know, all the counties. You have to request that, and I believe there's a years-long waiting list on that. I know the county actually uses a private auditor for those services. But I will say that when fraud is detected or suspected, and their, you know, kind of forensic folks come in and start digging, they do provide an incredibly valuable resource for this, because even, our local law enforcement, our investigator in our office is one of the best I've ever dealt with. Kevin Miller, he's on another level. But these folks are used to violent crime investigation. Your standard stuff of your robberies, your malicious assaults, your sexual assaults, those kind of things. When you're talking about financial crimes, it's a whole other beast. And it's so different, and the ways that people can fraudulently take money and attempt to cover it up and cover their tracks, it really requires some professional assistance. And the fraud unit at the auditor's office has been really, really fantastic to work with in that role.
Is that the former police chief, Kevin Miller?
That's the former police chief, Kevin Miller. And it's a 1-2 punch, because the thing with Miss Beavers, I mean, they were able to get this information, but she sat down with Kevin Miller and confessed everything to him. I mean, she fessed up to all of the theft, and so it was a great working relationship with the fraud department at the auditor's office and our own investigators.
Appreciate you coming in, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks to Joe Kinser on that. At 9:57, we are back with the final minute. Thank you, Joe Ferretti, via telephone, too. Thanks, Joe. Have a good day.